What's up, everybody? This is Brian Smith. This is another episode of Locked On Seminoles. We're going to talk about Will Howard, talk about all the different players that are in the portal and all the different things that come around with it, because like when a player goes in, that means somebody is interested in it. We're going to talk about why, if he goes to this school, it impacts another one, all the moving parts, NIL. We're going to talk about Cam Ward, and we're going to take your questions too, because the NIL stuff, I'm just starting to figure out. But one of the key parts to this, quite honestly, is whether or not you think you understand it and if you have questions. So with that, let's get started and talk about football for the Florida State Seminoles.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another episode of Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, and we are going to break down some players, but I want your opinion, so you don't have to put them in the chat yet, but be thinking about it. What do I want to know about NIL, how it works, transfer portal, etc.? It is, as they say, very complex, and I'm just learning about it too, but the more information I get from fans, the more I can ask questions from my contacts, people I know that are in college football, other recruiting analysts, et cetera, and we can all get better at this as time moves forward. I mentioned Will Howard in the beginning of this, and it's for a reason. To my knowledge, Florida State's not involved with him, but they might be. But if he goes to one school, that's one less school you're competing with for another guy. Moving parts, musical chairs. Part of that's NIL, but part of it's just the math of who's available. So I want to talk about that. Who fits Mike Norvell's system? That's a really big part, because one of the names that has been bandied about, DJ Uiagalelei. What does he bring to the table? Is he ready to make that next jump as a fifth-year senior? Played at Clemson for 3 years. Then he was the quarterback this past season at Oregon State. And then, quite honestly, he's in the portal. We don't know where he's going to go, but one of the schools that's been mentioned is Florida State. Does he fit Norvell's system? That's why I brought that up first. And how well would he do so? Finally, this is kind of what I alluded to in the open, and it's the big elephant in the room. Ready for anything. That's, if you're watching this on YouTube in its inception, with everything that I've heard of late, man, it is crazy how many guys just get in the portal. And I get that's the basic and the most important part, but what they're looking for, my expectations compared to others is crazy. And I'm starting to think that a lot of coaches are caught off guard with what these kids expect too, not only with how much money they might get with NIL, but what their playing time is going to be. And I'm going to give, before we get into questions and everything, let me be very clear with the basic story. There's a player I know about that was at another school, had a pretty good freshman year, and he went to the team and said that I have to be guaranteed the starter at spot X. I'll leave it at that, which was one of their deepest spots on the roster for this particular team. Basically, they told him to pound sand and hit the road. You cannot go to a team like that has any bona fide coaches and demand a starting spot, even if you're really good. He's a good player, but he wasn't necessarily the best guy, and I don't think he was for that team. I don't watch them practice or anything, but I'm like, whoa. Once we start going down that path, there's a problem. So I have a feeling that kid's going to have issues down the road, and it just kind of puts things in perspective. I didn't ask if he wanted NIL money, because once I heard he was wanted a guaranteed spot, the next question is, well, what are you going to give me too? He was told to hit the road. So yeah, that's crazy. Chat is open. If you've got a question, fire away. I'm going to throw out some stats on some different guys and players that I think that they should recruit at quarterback and why they would fit. But I want your take. I want you to ask, well, I like this guy, and here's why. Why don't you think that, let's just talk quarterback, and then we can move through other positions if you want. We'll end it whenever, but I do have a rather fun, it's just a little side note, a podcast that I have scheduled at 4:00 Eastern time with Brandon Olson from Locked On Gators because he's worried about all the things the negative going on with Florida. And he wants to bring me on to get my opinion. I can tell you it's not going to be very fun for the Gator fans, but that's a side note. It's really interesting to me that Norvell has used different quarterbacks. So let's break that down first. Can he use an RPO guy? Obviously. Jordan Travis fits it to a T. Second, can he use a younger guy and find a way to get a win? Well, he's done it 2 different games in a row. Rodemaker, maybe not young, but he's played very little, not very experienced. And then you bring in Brock Glenn, who missed part of this year to play in the ACC title game. Didn't have a great game, but they figured it out. They made enough plays to win. So I think anything that is involved with a mobile quarterback, and again, that's why I mentioned DJ in this lead up. He's one of the guys that's been mentioned along with Cam Ward. If they're going to do it, they've got to find guys that are going to make it happen in different ways. But I prefer somebody that has mobility. He's shown that that's his best. Could he win with a pure pro quarterback if it's a super accurate guy like Will Rogers? If he'd have went, I mean, he's going to Washington. It sounds like he's the quarterback that was at Mississippi State, threw for a ton of yards in that air raid. Could Norvell coach him? Sure. That doesn't mean it's the best fit. And as I sit here, I'm in Alabama for the state finals, in case you're wondering why I'm sitting in a hotel room out there. And by the way, the internet here is iffy. So if I scoot out for a second, that's what's going on. But I believe you're going to see Florida State consistently get guys that can move. Here's another example. I don't know if he's been mentioned with Florida State, but I love Daquan Finn. He's played 5 years at Toledo. Not Power 5, but he's been very effective. He can run 500 yards or so a year, maybe 600 one year. In the last 3, all 3 of them were very consistent. If you bring in a guy like that and put him around the receivers and tight ends and running backs that Florida State has shown they can get, that's a pretty good possibility. Let's see here. Hypnotic. Entitlement of these kids is crazy. Dude, you're not even kidding. Like telling somebody that you have to be the starter? Really? This was, to be clear, this was not a Florida State kid, but I was like, there's a guy with a ton of offers, big time offers, but still he was a freshman and he, whatever. That is truly hilarious. Would have been nice to see Tate play in the ACC title. Could tell us a lot. Yeah, I mean, oftentimes this is a great point, and Jonathan Virgil brings this up. Once a guy makes his first start, there's going to be jitters, there's going to be concerns. I get it. The second start, you expect some of those to alleviate. It's kind of like first game to second in a college football season. Jonathan, you're right. Or Joe Thin, excuse me. I don't know how much of a jump he made, but I mean, he's got to make some, right? I mean, it's just natural. How much? But I mean, with the concussion, they're going to be very sympathetic to that. And I get it. I don't think there's anything wrong with figuring out that that's a big deal. So I assume he'll play in the bowl game against Georgia, barring something very unforeseen, but it really would have been nice. It is what it is. BP says not DJ. I don't know if it will be. I'm just going by rumor. I don't know who they're leaning towards. I'm thinking we're looking for a one and done QB, so not to scare off younger guys. That is a really good point Hypnotic brings up. Look, you're probably going to lose quarterbacks in general. That's just part of how this thing works. But if you bring in a multiple year quarterback option that has some proven ability, like he started at a school as a sophomore and he's got 2 more years left, chances of you losing one of the freshmen at any school, this isn't a Florida State deal, pretty high. It's pretty darn high. Wade Bailey says, I know this has nothing to do with quarterback. Have seen some stuff about Marvin Jones Jr. transferring. Is there any smoke there? Somebody else mentioned that. I do not know. I've met him, but that was when he was still in high school. With the kids on the roster, we don't really have a way to get to that. So it's not like Norvell's going to offer him up if the kid's on the fence. So I wouldn't put a lot of stock in it. It's one of those things when it pops, it pops. That's just where I'm at. Andy Becker, can anyone tell me why the AP poll holds us so much weight ranking wise all year, but when it matters, it's thrown out the window? Love what you do. Keep up the good work. Go Noles. trying to understand polls is hilarious. The guys over at the Cover 3 podcast, they do a lot of gambling stuff, but they're really into football. And they'll pull up like what the AP voters vote, different teams. And sometimes they'll have just weird stuff. One of the guys got Florida State and Florida mixed up this year, if I remember right. Like literally had them like reversed. Well, that changes the overall vote. Some of these votes are a little weird. And sometimes they're just erroneous. It's terrible. I don't know how to explain that otherwise. Okay. K-Jack, they're great. Where's Jeremiah's last OV? Oh, we are. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We'll all know on Jeremiah Smith on the 20th of December. He's going through the motions with all this stuff at in-homes, doing his due diligence. More power to him. He's a great kid. I know him well, but I have no more insight than that. Yeah, quarterback is something that matters, K-Jack, when it comes to Jeremiah. I don't know if Ohio State can tell him, or Florida State can tell him, though, or Miami can tell him who the quarterback's going to be for sure next year. I don't know if any of them can. So that's going to make it really hard for him. I think those are the final three. What do you do? What do you do? Really, really difficult to get into that. But it's one of those things, and, you have to do what you have to do to make it work. And, I mean, you're in home, and how you get along with the kid, I would assume is still the most important thing. But you got to make sure that Jeremiah Smith is your priority. And that's all you can at this point, without the definitive answer at quarterback. So that's something to think about. Also, very definitive is FanDuel. FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And with the NFL season kind of going into the money time, literally and figuratively, this is a great time to be a part of it. If you're thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is also very easy to use. Oh, that's very true. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, traditional like on the actual games, player props, over under 100 yards rushing for a player, etc. Over unders on team scores, quarters, etc., and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right. Second thing here, talking about with Jeremiah. So let's just talk real quick. Big box recruiting. You have to balance how many scholarships you have, and you're going to have deficiencies in different spots on every roster in a given year. But with the portal, you have to anticipate and guess a little bit. This is so complex. We've got 5 scholarships, we think, with high school recruiting. Obviously, Jeremiah Smith, if he wants to come, you take him. But we only need this spot or this spot. And then 2 minutes later, your phone rings. Hey, coach, just so you know, I'm going into the transfer portal. That's wild. And I don't know if there's anything that you can do about that, but that's just where we are in college football. It is a never-ending cycle of fixing your roster. That's just the way it is. So we need to lock a transfer quarterback down before signing day. No, let me be more specific, Hypnotic. They need to lock one down like in the next 5 seconds, and that's so hard. What I'm asking is not realistic, and I'm being somewhat facetious. But if you want to hold on to they've got a really good receiver class, obviously. BJ and Wayne and all those guys. But you're not going to keep that class together, and definitely going to be hard to add Jeremiah Smith unless he knows something. I'm sorry, but what he saw in the last 2 games for Florida State is not going to entice Jeremiah Smith. It's not. It's not. I would be floored if he picked Florida State if they didn't have a quarterback in line already prior to signing day. Maybe I'm wrong. I've certainly been wrong many times before, but that's my take. Carolina Logic states, would love to get Cam Ward. Not sure how DJ fits in Mike's system. That's my question too. We are a lockstep on that. Here's why I say it. DJ is 250. He can move pretty good, and he'll lower the boom. I mean, that's a big old dude. 6'4", 250 is not friendly to get in front of. I get it. A, I don't want my quarterback lowering his shoulder. B, he's not the most nimble guy where he's making guys miss. When Jordan Travis stepped outside the pocket and he winds you up face, good luck. If you tackled him, he was still following forward. How many times do you remember back from the first time he played for the Noles until the last, when he ran, if he could literally see the guy, no, side shots or anything like that, wind up with the guy, how many times did he take a direct hit right in the chest? He's just elusive. That is a gift that he's been given, and I can guarantee you that those yards, if you went back and saw how many yards he got after contact, it would be very high. That's a great question. I think that he can coach a guy like that. I just don't think you're going to maximize. The other side of it is he doesn't take as many hits because you keep him in the pocket a little more, maybe run DJ 4 times a game instead of 8 that you would have run past. That's an argument, iffy, but that's an argument. Andy Becker says, do you think Tate transfers if we bring DJ or another guy in to compete? That is a tremendous question. And here's 2 parts to that. Number 1, I don't know. But number 2, if you think you better your roster for 24, I mentioned this on yesterday's live stream, too bad. You have to improve your roster, because if they get through 24, again, this is my opinion, if they get through 24, Florida State's going to have the 24 class, and then in 25, those freshmen and sophomores, you'll need fewer transfer portal guys. You hope Brock Glenn, or you hope Luke Crum, one of those 2 guys can kind of take over. If not, for whatever reason, then you get another portal guy. You got to get through this next year somehow. It's going to be a bit of a rebuilding year in Tallahassee, probably. They got a gazillion seniors. But if you can get a pretty good quarterback, go 8-4, 9-3, maybe better. It's, there's a lot of parts to figure out here. Kind of hard to project a record. But if you can do that, whether it's DJ or somebody else, you got to figure that part out. Then you should be looking at 10-win seasons pretty much thereafter. And then, bits and pieces here or there. I think you can do it. But again, I would prefer a more mobile guy. Daquan Finn, somebody like that. That's just my opinion. News on KJ. Is it Auburn now? He posted a picture of him in U Freeze with an in-home visit. I don't know how much I'd put its stock in that, because kids do that crap all the time. It's nothing besides just being nice. And KJ's a really good kid, by the way. But I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock in he's going one way or the other. There's a long recruitment to go. And I don't think Norvell's done his in-home yet. If somebody knows for sure that he has, please put it in the chat and I'll find it. But I don't think that he has. So we'll see. I hope we're looking at Daquan Finn. Yeah, same. This is Hypnotic. I watched some of his tape from when they played Ohio State. He looked pretty good. Yeah, again, he's also an experienced guy. If you're going to bring in a 1-year quarterback, taking a guy as the 6th year, doesn't that make sense? I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I would much rather do that and kind of go that route. It just seems like it's more logical, right? And Daquan, I've watched him. He's pretty darn accurate. He's got a lot of yards. He's played it against Big Ten teams several times, being a guy that's in the MAC. They always bring those kind of teams in. Why not? So I think he would be a lot higher for me probably than a lot of other teams would, but I don't know. Maybe it's because I've seen him play. Seeing a guy play live would be great. I haven't seen him in a stadium, but I think he could be that dude. So that's something to think about. Maybe he's not, but I think he'd be a really good guy. Speaking of really good, Prize Picks. What is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or less than 2 to 6 stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Here's the deal. With Prize Picks, you're just going out and you're looking at like 80 yards pass or receiving, 2 touchdowns passing, etc., over unders, and you can do different parlays. And they have a really cool feature. If your player on any of these different types of opportunities you have gets injured in the first half, they've got injury insurance against it. It gets reloaded. So that's a pretty good way to go. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Locked On College is LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. So again, it's prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege. Use code LockedOnCollege. First deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. All right. Now, Let's get back to the chat. Who else we got here? Meet the Knoll. What does the NIL look like for a good quarterback? That's a great question. This is something I've talked to people about. Me and a buddy of mine, we're discussing this. This 7-figure NIL talk, like, I don't know how much truth there is to the rumor that Patrick Payton wanted 7 figures, but I would almost guarantee you he wasn't getting it for a year. Now, maybe for 2, because he's got 2 years of eligibility. Redshirted, played in 22 and 23. So it's 2 years eligibility. If he played 2 years, possibly if he hit numbers, like, kind of like bonuses in the NFL. For a quarterback, yeah, it can go 7 figures because let's be honest, if you put a really healthy Jordan Travis on 20 other teams this year that went 7-5, 8-4, well, they probably win 2 or 3 more games. That 3-point loss becomes a 4-point win because he has 1 extra touchdown drive. There's no position more important than QB. Cam Ward, I told somebody earlier today, they go, what do you think Cam Ward will get? I said, this isn't the market, but I put up 2 fingers. I said, $2 million. I said, it only takes one person to offer him $2 million. Everybody else might offer him 800,000 to 1.2, but some boosters are like, I want my team to win now. And they offer me. It only takes one. So it's very subjective. The market value and what a player gets are not the same. Complex to say the least. Let's see. Lots of rumors that Blunt and KJ may flip. Any truth to that? I don't like the situation in terms of other schools recruiting these kids, but here's what I know. I mentioned this with KJ. He did an in-home with Freeze. Until I know really what's going on with the battles there's been a lot of rumors about there's not as much money as they need to have. I'm not involved with that. I have no idea. But if there's not, you're going to lose a bunch of kids because there are certain kids expecting money. If somebody wants to post some detailed information, not guessing, fire away in the chat and we can talk about it. But I don't know. Blunt, I'd be very careful with Miami there. They are going after him hard. So I would say the Blunt situation is more likely to trend south, figuratively and literally, for Florida State. What about MJ Morris, former of NC State? He's a kid I know, great kid. He could move. He's been there a couple of years, but he preserved a red shirt this year. That's an interesting guy. I haven't heard many people talk about him, but he hadn't played a ton. I don't think he fits NC State's offense very well. Florida State's offense, he fits better. That honestly is not a terrible thought. The risk with him is if you bring him in, you're probably going to lose somebody. You got to be sure you want him. But that's all makes it supreme. Great question. KJ was at NC State MJ was at NC State in case anybody's wondering. Viral authority, primetime. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. Ricky Callahan, why don't we go after someone who throws and runs? That's kind of the point. I think that's the preference, but everything is supply and demand. Like everybody wants Cam Ward. That's, kind of obvious. But what about anybody else? Who else is available? What else could they do? If they have X amount of, again, this comes down to NIL. You have X. You got to figure out your roster, your current guys, the recruits coming in, other positions, and quarterback. Trying to find that balance is hard. And this is something that I've talked about with a lot of other people on other shows that they bring me on for Locked On. Are you realistically a national title contender in 24? That's got to be a yes or no. And as a program, an AD, a coach, an NIL collective, you all got to be on the same page. We think we're going to be pretty good. We want this quarterback, but we're not going to win it with him or without him. So why don't we get another quarterback that's pretty good, go to a bowl game, but spend some of the other NIL money on other positions that have multiple years of eligibility that are like freshmen and sophomores. And then in 25, we add that quarterback and we win it. That's how I look at it. Florida State, I think, is more in the latter boat. They're going to losing too much this year to compete for the title next year, in my opinion, barring just something unforeseen and going crazy in the portal. So they should balance it out. If they don't get Cam Ward, it wouldn't bother me as much. Maybe you take a quarterback that has 2 years eligibility. Maybe you change your mind and go after Will Howard, whatever. Go that route. That's just